one of the speeches in the Lords, I think it's from our own Lord Purvis, had said that, requested that the George Medal should be given to the Ukrainian Parliament and it got a sort of resounding response in the House for the work that they have done and the example they're setting to the world, as our own Parliament did during the Second World War, to carry on in the face of that. Kira is a member of the Ukrainian Parliament, and as I said, they've really been standing up and continuing their work. Maybe she'll be able to talk to us about that. But anyway, enough from me. I'll hand over to Sal. You all know Sal is our Baroness Brinton, was previous president of the party and is now the vice president of LDEG, which is the Alliance of Liberal Democrats for Europe, as is Kira. Both of them are vice presidents of LDEG. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. And I just wanted to say to Kira, for us, the suggestion of the George Medal going to the Ukrainian Parliament is very, very special, because the last place that was awarded it was the island of Malta in the Second World War, when they were being starved out by the Germans. I don't know that it's ever been awarded to any other place. So if we can press for that to happen for the British, that would be a very significant recognition. That's how strong the feeling today was in the meeting. And I had the privilege of talking about you, Kira, because obviously all the focus yesterday was on Zelensky. And the point that I made at the beginning of my speech was that since the 24th of February, in Parliament, you have all worked together and you have all taken whatever role has been necessary, regardless of party politics. And you are, as David said, very well known, because I've seen you travel and your schedule, and it is chaotic. And you're doing that on top of your parliamentary duties and on top of what's happening in your private life at home, of what it's like to live in Kyiv when there's very little power. So would you like to introduce yourself and what is happening at the moment that might interest our members? And then we'll just debate that a little bit further before we start taking questions.
Sal, David, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me today. First of all, let me extend all the gratefulness that we have for all the support that we have received. My mom says it's never too much to say thank you, so I want to go with it and say thank you, really. And probably President Zelensky visit made lots of buzz in the United Kingdom, and I can tell you here he had same amount of buzz. So now we are like in a similar situations when everybody is emotional. It was very important for us that he made the visit to the United Kingdom to share our gratitude on behalf of Ukrainian people. You know, your previous prime minister was here in the toughest times, and the fuel that we are all running on, especially right now, is the hope. So every time when we are receiving another and another and another sign of hope, and you are picking everything that you can count as a hope, right? It was huge. So right now it's like another sign, and the idea of awarding Ukrainian Parliament with a medal is super humbling, I can tell you. So what can I tell you about what's going on and how the last year have been? So we are moving very close to the 1-year anniversary of the full-scale invasion. And if I remember correctly, it was like 3rd or 4th day when I was talking to Lib Dem friends also online. And I remember it was like I was still here in this room and I was in such a panic. And if somebody would have told me at that moment that we will survive a year, I would probably not kind of bet on it a lot of money. But it's a year in and we are still here, and it's a miracle as it is. Over the last year, I have traveled to 34 countries and talked to probably like whoever I could with one mission to get us to go further and to have anything that we can get to our country delivered. Because you see, right now, and we are not producing any weapons, and we are not producing supplies. And we totally rely on the support that we are receiving from our allies. And we can provide manpower, and we can be faster, smarter, or whatever your strategy should be at the case when you are a David fighting a Goliath. We know that this situation would not tremendously change. We would not be as huge as Russia. We would not be as productive in terms of the weapons as Russia. We would not have the resources as Russia does. But what we have is ourselves, and we have an ability to create alliances with so many great countries, powerful countries, and people around the world. I think when we are talking about the lessons, this is the first one and the most important one, right? That the wars, the fights that you cannot fight alone, well, you can try fight it alone, but you cannot win it alone. You can win it when you are fighting together. And it has been incredible for all of us, the amount of the support, not only the weapon or money or supplies, but emotional support, humanitarian aid that was coming and is still coming. The lesson of unity also comes to Ukrainian parliament, and I'm so proud of my colleagues, how aside of that, politicians really like to have different opinions and be very vocal about them and fight about them till the end, but that we were kind of able to put those things aside and work together as one team. It has not been easy, but it still works a year from now. My favorite story about the first day in Ukrainian parliament when the Kyiv was bombarded, and we got 400 members of 420 to the chambers under the bombs. When we were announcing martial law, holding hands and singing national anthem, will probably be like a year old right now. It's still a magic, but it also reminds us and has the parallel with the parliament working in the United Kingdom during the Second World War. So President Zelensky mentioned Churchill and the feeling that Churchill had. I think this is something that we can relate to when you know that in front of you there is nothing that like lots of hard work, sweat and blood and all that, and you just go on and on. And I'm so glad that people in the United Kingdom can relate to that. I think this is the background to all the strong support that we have received. Funny note, still, I know that Boris Johnson's personality is kind of iffy in the United Kingdom, but it is still so popular in Ukraine, I cannot begin to tell you. Boris Johnson burgers are still being sold in large and small places in Ukraine. And this is something that you cannot you cannot fight it, you cannot fix it. You just have to, go with it. But this is again something that people in Ukraine really remember, is when the world is, shocked and on fight or run, they choose to stay and freeze. Some people say, yeah, well, I will go ahead and then we'll figure it out. And this is something that people will remember. So what is the situation on the ground right now? First of all, we are in preparation for the huge offense from Russian side. How do we know that there will be offense from their side? First of all, we have seen the mobilization starting September, October. Different calculations are saying that they are mobilizing from 300,000 to 500,000. We don't know the exact number, but we know the amount of people, and they have been trained since that time. Second, we have the space pictures from the space to confirm that, and that they have been moving newly produced weapons to the battlefields. Second fact that is proving that there would be offense and is that since September, Putin did not have any major win. Basically, since the time that we took over Kherson, they did not have anything to show off to the propaganda, and they did not have like any proof of like that situation is still good, still okay. And the third is that Putin was very clear about that they are going to go ahead. And, you know, the tyrannies, they are super fixated on the dates. So we know that on 24th of February, there would be probably a major missile attack or something. This also makes us, so this preparation from our side makes us evaluate on how far we have come and what we have achieved in terms of military support and in terms of military preparation from our side. So a good thing is that impossible things happened. And this is my favorite part, because I want to show the world and the history that whenever somebody tells you no or impossible or it's never going to happen, you just look at it and you laugh at its face and you push for what you really truly believe at, and it has so many chances to happen. Just remember a year ago, we were receiving basically Kalashnikovs saying, okay, you guys go ahead, become partisans. And then we started getting heavy weapons, javelins and laws, and then HIMARSes. Then we started getting more and more of the like general support. Then there was a huge turn in this tide when President Biden confirmed that we will get the Patriot missiles. Maybe it was not a huge in terms of what we can do with one Patriot system, but with world leader minds saying, okay, yeah, it's okay to give them what they need. And now the tank coalition, and now we are pushing to have the fighter jets coalition. Why is it important? So there are two sides. The first one is the battlefield, but the second one is the peaceful city's life, like mine. We are not protected from the attacks from the air. Well, we try to be protected as much as possible, but Ukraine's territory is huge. And no matter how many of the air defense systems you get us, and thank you so much for everything that we've got, it's still not enough for us to say it's okay to sleep in your bed. And this is hurtful because it's basically so stressful and so painful that it's not okay to sleep in your bed. Like 2.5 weeks ago, there was a missile attack on Dnipro, where the missile hit a building, killing 46 people, many of them in their beds. And this is like our everyday life, that I sleep with when my windows open, not to miss air raid siren. And because, you know, like it's not like the siren, it's something that tells you, you go and hide, because there is a huge piece of metal going out to kill, maybe you. And and since Russia started getting the Iranian drones that are really cheap, that is why they can just like them, it's more and more dangerous. So we are right now at our like most capacity of what we can do with the air defense systems that we have. So if we get the jets, we kind of get like another layer of security and ability to intercept the missiles and defend our peaceful cities. Just make sure that all the people who are not fighting have less chances to die tomorrow. And this is super important, not only because it's fair and humane, and it's just because it allows people to live their normal life, do business, like, and not being at the threat of dying tomorrow for no reason. Second point is that, so this is why when we are saying give us the fighter jets, it's not because we like fighter jets or want fighter jets. It's because it's essential. It's like a matter of life or death for us. And second point, for the battlefield, there we really need tanks, and we really need, like, honestly, anything that you can give us, anything that anybody can give us, we will use, and we will use it for the good matter, because it's still David versus Goliath situation. And when you're working with David versus Goliath, you have to be smarter, you have to be faster, you have to be more modern, you have to be more trained. You cannot use people as battlefield meat as Russia does. You have to always figure something out. And this is what we have been doing, figuring stuff out. But we will need many of those, many of weapons and supplies. You know, one of the first reactions of one of the Polish officials, our friend, I wouldn't mention his name, but like on the third month of the wars, when there were like millions of refugees from Ukraine in Poland, and I asked him how they are doing, he said, it's just right now when people start realizing that refugees need to eat every day. Because you know, it's very easy to give support once or twice, but it's super exhausting to do it every single day. Well, I can rephrase it and say it's only right now when there are so many people realizing that we need bullets every single day and missiles from our side every single day and in many, many places. And that it's like ongoing thing that we will continue needing, it would not end. When the full scale invasion started, we were kind of thinking, okay, let's survive for like a couple of months and then we will see. Then it was like, let's get to the autumn. Then it was, let's get to New Year's and then we will think about the future. I think right now it's clear for everyone that war would not end tomorrow, no matter how hard we will try. And the day after tomorrow as well. So it's becoming a marathon where you are running on hope, where you are like keeping yourself going with all the things that's happening, just like here, having sip here and there on the good and bad things that you see, and in between like huge love and huge rage, you go on. Another important topic that I wanted to explain to you is how we deal generally with life. So, and why we need fighter jets. So one of the huge attacks that Putin made after he was not able to achieve any success on the battlefield, he attacked our critical energy infrastructure. So as of right now, more than 50% of energy infrastructure destroyed. So generally, we produce enough of energy, but we cannot distribute it. And it's destroyed that way that we cannot fix it quickly. And our main goal was to make sure that hospitals, critical infrastructure has like sustained energy. But for the rest, we just manage, we just like figure it out. What it means, and I was telling it at the very beginning today itself, but I think it's very common here. So we have the electricity outages, which they also have impact on your running water supplies and on your heating. And it's very cold in Ukraine. And so the heating was a priority because we couldn't have people like freezing in their homes. So it goes the heating, then the running water, and then electricity. So you would almost don't get electricity, especially in the regions where the structure was very damaged. So when you're waking up in the morning, you check if your phone is charged, and if it was charged, then like good for you, you're like a good. Then you check if you have a heat. If you do, great. If no, then you just try to turn on like heating that you have. Running water, it's like 50-50 if you have it. And again, you have to have water stored everywhere at home, because sometimes you can not have the water for like 2 or 3 days. And it's normal because again, it's like nobody's fault except Russians. And so then you check if you have electricity. And in many cases you don't, and even if you do, you have to manage it. So I have diesel generators that I'm running on, and I'm talking to you right now, but it's also part of my everyday life to when there is especially heavy snow, when I'm turning on putting on my huge boots, and every 2 hours go outside and I pour diesel into generator, so there would be just like light. And we also keep the lights on all the time. So then you have, when you have electricity, and especially it's at night, so then you can go around the house and quickly start your dishwasher, your washing machine, and your like dryer, like whatever you can, because it's an opportunity to have everything cleaned up. How people manage, it's extremely hard. So my friend, she has a toddler and they live on 13th floor. And she recently called me and she was crying and they said, like, what's going on? And she said, you know, we just got to 13th floor and I realized that I forgot the apartment keys in the car. So these things are adding up with everything. And you have to take care not only about yourself, but about so many people who are in a much worse situation than you are, right? So we are setting up those unbreakability shelters where you can charge your phone or have like a hot water for the tea, etc. But there are so many people who just cannot get out of their apartments, and we as cities and as organizations have to figure out where those people are and how do we help them out. And this is an important part, because it is one of the challenges that we took on ourselves, saying people who are getting into this winter are people who are getting out of this winter. And this is like a national idea right now to make sure that we all survive. I have recently been to Mykolaiv and Kherson. These are the cities in the south that are very close to the battlefield. And I can tell you the way that we are living here in Kyiv is just super luxury, because there are like, when it was a time when in Mykolaiv there was no running water at all in the whole city for 7 days. In Odessa there were no electricity for 5 days, like generally nowhere. So it means that the hospitals and all the structure has to run on generators. And Kherson, just like a really humanitarian catastrophe. And so what we can do is we need to, again, regroup and direct more and more aid and support where it is needed. The good thing is the winter is almost over. So we just hope that every day it's supposed to get better. But long term, we have to figure out on how we are going through the next winter, because I don't see how it's going to be easier. And the last point, because I know we have questions, so I want to tell you about the project that I'm super passionate of, and I do really hope that Sal had a chance to talk about it. Yeah, great. So we understand that at some point, the struggles that we have will dim to people who are struggling themselves. And my last visit to the United Kingdom, everything that I have been talking to almost everyone were like the cost of living, the energy bills, and there was some terrifying Sky News discussion when people had to give up their pets because they could not provide to them. And it was just like something heartbreaking for me, because I'm also like an animal shelter activist and I have a shelter with 70 cats. So you just cannot process that. So we knew that this is going to happen. And this is Putin's strategy to basically destroy this unity and make sure that everybody is upset and saying, oh, why we are helping them, we don't have it for ourselves. There is a solution. It's logical, it's very fair, and it's the right thing to do. And politically, it's very seductive, I would say. It's to use Russian money, sanctioned money, to cover not only for support of Ukraine, but also for some of the programs that are being spent on inside the country, like supporting of Ukrainian refugees, covering for buying weapons, covering for the training of our military. This is like a huge golden star that Britain has for that. Right now in the world, there is $500 billion of stored Russian assets that have been sanctioned. So Putin has been preparing for the war. And despite of the thing that he hates the Western world, he loves the sovereign immunity that his money can be stored under. So it's 350 billion of sovereign assets and 150 billion of oligarch assets. And a year ago, again, when I met Bill Browder, author of Magnitsky List, who had this idea that we should try and seize those funds and use them for the sake of Ukraine. There were not too many people who believed that it is possible and that anybody would do that. Guess what? Right now, Canada have already passed the legislation on oligarchs' money, and we are waiting for first 26 million to be sent over to Ukraine. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's like the breaking the ice situation. Before the New Year's, United States have passed the economic criminal bill, where they have already also squeezed in the amendment on using oligarchs' money for the sake of Ukraine. And again, guess what? Last week, Manhattan's court already confiscated $5 million from one of the Russian oligarchs, and they are going through this process of sending them over to Ukraine. A couple of days ago, there was a bill introduced in the UK Parliament that is going after oligarchs' money, but also after sovereign asset money, because these are the money that everybody's just like, yeah, but how do we go with the sovereign immunity? Is it too much? No, it is not too much. We need money. We're right now at the same boat where we need money. And this is why I do hope that the United Kingdom will be the first one to push on the sovereign asset situation. The EU already committed that they will seize Russian assets and use them for the sake of Ukraine. But with all due respect, we know that it will probably take the longest time from their side. Yes, so I have so many stories and so many things that I can tell you, but I will stop right now and I let Sal talk, and then I'll be happy to hear questions, because that will direct my explanations.
Thank you very much, Kira. And I'm just going to say a couple of things to sit alongside what you've done, because I think colleagues may not know some of the things that you and I have done together, and they may not know what the UK is currently doing around the edge of Ukraine. So I'll start with that. Some people know I have a close relative in the UK military, and they have just come back from 5 months deployed with the RAF, buzzing the Russian planes. And in fact, I don't know if people remember that before Christmas, there was a Russian jet plane that dropped a missile in front of an RAF plane. It was an observation plane going around the edge of the Black Sea. And this relative's unit got up in the air and escorted the Russians away out of neutral airspace. And that's happening every single day. It's happening across the North Sea. It's happening. We've got RAF Lossiemouth and their main role with the Typhoons there, which are the jets that Ukraine would love to have as well. But they're also in and around the Mediterranean. They're in and around Estonia, and they're in and around southern Romania. So that's the biggest thing that we can do. Obviously, there's NATO rules, and we can't go into Ukraine itself, and we can't go into Russia, but we are just providing extra support for Ukraine and saying, you cannot do this, you are misbehaving, this is neutral airspace, or it's not neutral airspace, but it's not your airspace. We've got a reasonable number of troops now right on the edges, and we've had military in Estonia and I'm trying to think which the other states are, and I think in Poland, since the Maidan of 2014. Other European countries' forces are dotted all the way around on the edge. So there is a very clear presence of military on the frontier. And again, I know from reports of soldiers who were in Estonia in 2014, that the messages that they were getting back was that actually that was really surprising Putin. He had not expected the West to behave that way. So now all of that is just being escalated, and we are continuing to support, and there's no question of withdrawing it at any stage. The other things that are going on, I mean, Kira talked about the ways in which we're able to help. And again, since the Maidan in 2014, it has not been public knowledge that the UK military have been training Ukrainians in very specific things. There wasn't very much going on before this time a year ago, but now we really are showing, and I think there's an immense trust between the Ukraine military and the UK military, and I really hope that's helping. Yesterday, you may have seen that Zelensky and Sunak went down to where Ukrainian troops were being taught how to use the Challenger tanks. So, you know, that's very practical, but it's happening in lots of different ways. And clearly there's going to be some air training support as well, because Sunak sort of said that yesterday. I think the other thing I'd want to point out from the speeches today, there were 30 speakers in a debate that went on for over, I'm just trying to get this right, 3.5 hours. One speaker out of 30 had a very exceptional viewpoint, but he's always been like that. And as his front bencher said when he came to speak, to say, at least we allow it. In Russia, he would not be allowed to say it, not just in the Duma, he would not be allowed to say it at home, he would not be allowed to say it in the streets. So, you know, we respect, we disagree, and I think everyone who spoke after said that they disagreed with this man. But cross-party, whether there were people who were former very senior civil servants, very senior air marshals. There were 2 very, very senior military people speaking, former ambassadors, and people from all the parties, all saying the same thing, that this is the time we have to continue. We've given a commitment. It is more than just Ukraine's fight, and Kira will forgive me for saying this, but it is more, because if we allow Putin to overrun Ukraine, the Baltic states will be next, and there will be real pressure on other colleagues elsewhere in the EU. And we have to make sure that international boundaries are respected. In the debate today, we had a bit of talk about what do we do about the breaches of human rights, the war crimes, all of those things. And again, there was unanimity. I spoke particularly about the abducted children. I'm a former trustee of UNICEF. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, the Russia signed the Declaration for the Rights of a Child in 1990 when it was first agreed at the UN. I counted up, they've breached 7 of the specific rights, excuse me, in the Charter. But there is one specific one about adoption. And the Russian press has been boasting about 300 babies that were taken from Mariupol and adopted in Russia, and they're going to be taught to be good Russian citizens. There's another horrifying end to that from the older children who were taken, who were 16, 17 years old. When they get to conscription age, they will be forced to fight for Russia in Ukraine. And that is appalling. It is absolutely appalling. And it just has to be added to the list of all the other war crimes that you see that are going on. I think Putin, and this was said in our debate, has made some very terrible assumptions, both in the run-up to the 24th of February last year, but subsequently as well. He had no idea that the one thing he would do was to unite the Europe, not just the EU, Europe. And he really has. And I think from my work in ALDE, I don't know if Kira agrees, there's been a complete tone change, not just about Russia, not just about the threat of security and war. It's about everything we do. And I have to say to you that the disaster that our government have made of Brexit has also helped in that debate, because everybody inside the EU is saying it's really important that we continue to work together. And those countries like Poland and Hungary, who will be, and even Italy, were beginning to talk about leaving, have stopped. It's just stopped completely. So I think we have a completely different EU. And it was very, very noticeable that in the brief 46 days that Liz Truss was our Prime Minister, she went to a Europe meeting because she felt it was really important that the UK was represented at that. Now, that would not have happened 6 months before. It just would not have happened. So there is a sea change going on in the whole way that even the UK is, I'm going to call it Europe because that's what they do, but they actually know and understand that they have to work with the EU in a way that they were just deriding before. And I'm talking about ministers here. I'm not responsible ministers who have to deliver particular things. So I am going to pause as well. We have a number of comments and questions. I'm going to, sorry, Kira, did you want to come back just while I call them up and look at them? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add on a bigger picture and support what you have said, Sal. because I think it is important that we are not only concentrated on Europe. And when I'm saying Europe, I mean UK as well. And I mean Ukraine as well, by the way. So we are not only concentrated in Europe, we are always looking at the bigger picture. So one of the things that I learned over the last year when I traveled not only to European countries and United States and Canada that are like obviously our allies, is that we are in this bubble, in the democratic bubble, where we have our differences, we have our like different ways of looking at the future and how do we develop, etc., etc. But it's we still have a very particular view of the world, human rights, and what's right and wrong. But the minute you step away from this bubble, you see that the world and which is called the rest of the world, and this is super offensive, it looks at things very differently. So African countries, which each of them has the UN writing vote. Russian propaganda has been extremely strong there. And they distrust the West, and they have so many issues that from the past that right now are saying, well, we do not know what's going on and who is right or wrong. We have been wronged so many times before. So for example, when we are talking about bigger picture and Ukraine's influence on the food security, the points that have been discussed in G20 meeting in all African countries, and the food shortage crisis that is only going to become worse, we need to understand that Ukraine was a huge part of this food supply process. But it is not clear to countries who that can be our allies. African countries think that it is Russia that is feeding them. And it's so painful for me. And it's like a huge path of education that we will have to do. By the way, just telling you, before the war, full-scale invasion started, Ukraine was one of the top 3 or 5 world suppliers of wheat, sunflower oil, tomato, grains, and corn. And right now, 20%, maybe a little bit more of our territory is being minefield. And which is not going to magically stop being a minefield a year, 2 years, and a decade from now. So then we are talking South America, and when we are talking Asian countries, they say, we don't want to deal with that. Russia is not that bad. And so it shows us how much work is there to do. It shows us that right now we should have a unity between the democratic countries because we have to explain the world what's going on. What I have seen is there are so many tyrants that are looking precisely, they're looking like a hawks right now at what's happening and how the Western world reacts. They are looking for a small sign of weakness because that will allow them to do something similar. Like China is looking around, and when I've been to South Africa and we had leaders of liberal parties from African countries, I was in the room and I asked them one question. I said, please raise your hand if your country has a neighbor that historically always wanted to take a piece of your land, always wanted to have something. And almost everybody raised their heads. So these countries are looking around and thinking, okay, is there a weakness? And my point is the first good thing that happened since the full-scale invasion was when we got the candidacy to EU status. It was a huge deal. I cannot even begin to tell you how huge it was for everybody, and for people that don't understand the difference between candidacy and membership and like what it even means. It just meant that something good happened and the doors that were super closed for us became open. And we as a parliament, over the last year, we have gone through all the 7 requirements from European Commission of what we should do. So now President Zelensky and the EU-Ukraine summit we're coming there, like people with the homework done. We know that we are at the very beginning of the path of the EU extension, but it is so critically important for us. And again, like it's emotionally, politically, economically, in all cases. But I want everybody to think about like another side of the story. We all know that there would be trillions of dollars flowing into Ukraine to rebuild. What we have seen is like I don't even know if the trillion will be enough. And we are all worried that this money will be, spent with the transparency. They would not create new oligarchs. And I see the only good way of us being somewhere like very close in the EU extension process, and also having all the processes and policies in place, so we would not waste this chance. So we will really have, because one of my biggest things when I'm going to Poland and Baltic states, and every single time I go there, I look around, I admire what they have done, and then I have this bittersweet feeling. I'm looking at it and saying, geez, we could have had that as well. We can have it. And this is what I will be fighting for. So we will have it as well. And this is why I'm persuading from this side, saying, guys, just let us spend the money that will be coming in the European way. That's it.
Well, thank you very much for that. I'm just going to go through some of the questions, and then at some point you and I need to talk about the demining issue, because I think that's a good example of how we have worked together. I don't just mean you and me, but our two countries. So excuse me, I'm going to cough. So Julie Adnams-Hatch, who has Ukrainian guests with her, says even before the 24th of February, her guest's husband and her could see no future to start a family in Odessa. David, could you read the question? I'm sorry, I'm going to go on mute.
Okay, let me call it up. Yep. So, Julie, and I know because Julie's a neighbour of mine. She says she has Ukrainian guests, and one of the Ukrainian guests, Yulia, says, my husband and I could see no future to start a family in Odessa with the constant threat from Russia. Now living in England with my sponsor, Julie, what hopes can I have for my longed for children back in Ukraine?
Julie, thank you so much for this question. So the goal of us fighting this war is not only to win the war, but to make sure that our children would not have to fight it like in 10 years. This is the goal, if you ask me, because I totally understand the threats, and I totally understand that for people to return to Ukraine and for us to rebuild the country and for us to have like a real future, we need to make sure that Russia would not attack us again, that we are not living in fear anymore. And this is why all of us, and President Zelensky and all of us, we were like declining all the ideas of peace talks or negotiations, because we all know very well what it means to have peace talks with Russia, what it means when you're just like alone with the aggressor and he can do whatever he wants. And basically nothing in the past, nothing, there are no facts in the past that would say that agreements with Russia would work and would protect anybody. Look to what they have done in Chechnya, they have done in Georgia, they have done in Ukraine, they are doing in Belarus. So we understand that they would not change their imperialistic idea. And this would mean then, and I hate to be saying that if Russia will remain in their current situation, Ukraine will have to become a militaristic country like Israel, maybe even more militaristic. And this is not what I want for my country. And this is why all the ideas of finishing the war, winning the war, need to come with the true mechanism of making sure that Russia would not attack again. And every time, and I like, this is a gift for a great question to everybody who suggests that we should make a peace deal or anything. Ask them when they would find it okay to get on a plane that flies to Kiev. Imagine that the war is over tomorrow. Like, would they feel okay sitting on a plane that is going to Kiev, knowing that Russia crazy neighbor who shot MH17 would always still have the missiles and always want to destroy us. So I can tell you, I will do everything possible and impossible that is in my hands, that we will get to the point where we can assure our children they would not have to go through the same terror that we are going right now.
Thank you, and apologies for that cough. Julie has another question for you. This is from her, not from her guest. She says, is a head-on conflict between Russia, USA, and Western Europe unavoidable?
I think everybody is trying to figure out the best way to take Russia down, and not only Russia, China probably as well, and some other tyrannies. With this kind of proxy matter, supporting us with weapons and supplies, and weakening Russia down with sanctions. But honestly, I can tell you how the rest of the world sees that. They all see it as a conflict between Russia and the Western countries. This is why it's so important that we win, because otherwise it will prove that all the Western countries' resource and willingness is not enough to fight one damn dictator. And it would be just so stupid.
Philip Goldenberg has put a couple of comments in. He says they're not questions, but that's fine. So I'll just read them out. Hi to me. I've known Philip for, I think, well over 3 decades, aren't we, Philip? We're in the party. But a suggestion that when we talked about the award that went to Malta, it was the George Cross, not the George Medal, and he's absolutely right. But in fact, I think Jeremy misspoke, because he definitely said a George Medal, but we'll make sure the right one gets into the system. And then Philip says to you, Kira, greeting from a fellow Ukrainian. His father was born in, I'm going to get it wrong, Bohuslav.
Bohuslav is fine, yeah.
And my maternal grandmother was brought up in Dnipro. So there you go. And then Philip makes a very important point. Doesn't the wonderful Zelensky show how much better it is to have a head of government, a professional comedian? And actually, I was talking to one of the conservative peers after our debate who was saying the same. He didn't say comedian, he said a professional actor who could communicate. And I think actually it is because he's a comedian, because you don't remain a comedian if you don't have good timing. And the one thing we saw from Zelensky yesterday in his speech to our parliament was his timing on every phrase was spot on. As an ex-stage manager, I mean, I don't see that very often, and it was really, really good. Kira, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. So not getting into political or anything or any other items, I think we are really lucky that Zelensky was at his position at the time when the full-scale invasion started, and we still have like a really great commander on top of our army, General Zaluzhny, who is doing like a fantastic job. But what we really needed, we needed somebody to tell the story, and Zelensky was great in telling the story and appealing to people's emotions. And you know, when I'm thinking of it, there is something deeper in it, because him and his biography itself, along with Ukraine and the symbolism, is showing everybody this, you know, seductive story that no matter what the world thinks of you, you are capable of much, much more. You know, when he was a comedian, nobody expected a lot from him. And then he became a president. And then when he was a president in Ukraine, at some point, nobody expected a lot from him. And then he proved everybody wrong when the war started, when the full-scale invasion started. And same with Ukraine, when, again, nobody expected that we will last long, right? And then we showed this idea that every person wants to believe about himself, that the world is wrong about you. The world does not understand what you would do, how heroic you can be when the time comes. And this is what our story is about. And Zelensky's story is about, like, that they are all wrong. You are different, you are a hero, you can do much more.
Thank you. That's lovely. And I mean, I think one of the points I want to make is that the way Kira has put that absolutely demonstrates that I think all politicians in Ukraine, and by the way, there's a question later on about how is our Liberal Party doing in Ukraine. I have to tell you, we have 5 sister parties in Ukraine. Golos, the party that Kira leads, is the longest member of ALDE since your foundation, and we're delighted to have you. You are very definitely a Liberal Party as well, but there are others as well, and it's important to understand that part of that has been because ALDE itself is so internationally and outward looking and wanting to get parties from outside the EU involved, that we've really found it very, very welcoming that they wanted to join us and have done. Kira, did you want to add anything about the 5 parties?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to tell you how ALDE has been supportive since the day one and before that, and how so many ALDE members have come here to Ukraine just to give you a hug, support you, and go through the places of the terror to then to share the stories. And it was like truly it was really like a human touch to what we to our relationship. We really indeed have 5 parties that are members of ALDE, and my party, Golos, we are the first liberal party to ever enter Ukrainian parliament. So you can imagine, Ukraine is kind of conservative country and have always been, and so in fact we are very unique because we are the smallest faction in Ukrainian parliament, but we are still fighting for our liberal values and the things that we truly believe at. And the president's party have joined ALDE like after that, but because they are the majority and they represent the majority of Ukrainians, it's very hard for them to take a stance on like liberal points like equality or marijuana or civil partnership or like other items. However, when we step forward on those matters, they can like jump in and support us. Like, there is like a story. I don't know if I have told it, but I'll repeat it. So we had, before we got the candidacy to European Union, we were looking for some of the signs that we can show, like some symbolic votes. So we have found the Istanbul Convention that could be a matter to confirm our dedication to European values. And so the Istanbul Convention question was in place for like, I think, 10 years. And when we came into the parliament, we were saying, it was one of our promises. We said, we will make the Istanbul Convention ratified in Ukraine. However, the first year into the parliament, I was hit hard by the reality, and we learned that there has not been even enough votes to get it into the, like into the chambers. But before the candidacy, and when we didn't know if we are getting it or not, and we needed like to have a symbolic vote and persuade our allies that we really, really are Europeans, we actually got almost a constitutional majority on that. So you can imagine how important it was and how crucial it was for all of us, for me personally, because it was something that I would not ever believe happening, but we ratified it. And now we are one of the countries that have it done.
Lovely. Complete change of topic now. Inga Lockington, I don't know if Inga still lives in Suffolk, but that's where I knew her, says, listening to you and the struggle for all your residents, I wonder if solar lamps would be any good as we get closer to longer days. Solar lights also look as if they can charge mobile phones these days.
Yeah, so here is like, I want to take on this. Thank you so much for this question. So yes, there is a part of the disaster that I did not tell you about, is that we have curfew and the streets are dark at night and the traffic lights are working super hectic. So it's a terrible idea to drive at night generally, and plus you are not allowed to drive at night. But we, even beforehand, we started having traffic lights and street lighting powered by solar panels. And they are the only ones that are working right now when everything turns dark. So it's like a good proof that it works. And I think this summer we will have this like a game changing for everyone, because people will be preparing for the next winter, and they will be changing to solar a lot. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. You see, I'm wearing sweater because it's plus minus here. So, but so the question would be, how I don't have solar panels just yet. I have to figure out for my home, like if it will make sense. But I think right now we are pushing for all kinds of alternative, and not only alternative, but also like, separated energy supplies, because that like tomorrow another energy station can be hit by the missile, and you will save us nothing. So we are right now working with the European Union, by the way, on changing them lamps everywhere to the energy saving lamps, and it has been like a real blast, because people now understand what is the difference between the normal lamp and like an energy saving one. But I think in terms of the solar, there would be a huge boost in that, probably during the longer days.
Thank you. David, I think you wanted to come in next, and then we'll come back to the next batch of questions.
Yeah, no, it's because I've seen there was a question in the Q&A as well, and it sort of ties in when you were talking earlier. I wanted, you were saying about how Ukraine is sort of forging, your identity as a country, and what came up in the debates earlier today was around the Russian-speaking parts of the country, and how Putin had sort of expected them to almost sort of fall in with him, but in actual fact, that there's this sort of Ukrainian identity for all Ukrainians is sort of being forged. Is that your take on things, Kira? Would you like to comment on? So
to explain it a little bit better, I need to give you a small historic understanding. So Ukraine has been a part of Soviet Union, and during those times, Ukrainian language was perceived as a minority language, like in all all the national languages were perceived as minority languages in all parts of Soviet Union. There was Russian languages, and there was in the villages they talk their funny, their funny one. And so when I was brought up in Russian, though I'm from the Western Ukraine, and my generation, we were all Russian speakers, and it was again perceived for a long time that the ones who are speaking Ukrainian just funny. And there were a part of their country, like the eastern part, that was completely Russian, was not even studying it in Ukrainian schools. Since we obtained independence, we were pushing for it, but very slowly. People do not like the change, especially when it was not so much of the importance. We were related to Russia, and we had lots of trade relations with them. So when Putin attacked in 2014, there were regions, and there were many people who were saying, well, yeah, we are uniting. It's well, who knows who is good or bad, etc. in the east of the country, because we learned that the language is a super strong tool, because it gives you an ability to read the news in Russian, watch Russian TV channels, be in Russian cultural space. But Putin thought that because he did not get such a resistance in 2014, that he can move forward. What he did not account for during this time, we also changed. The Maidan that happened in 2014 was the historic idea that we do not want to go with Russia. And we made it very clear for ourselves that we want to join EU and NATO, no matter which language we are speaking. So he still saw that he still has an upper hand. So this was the first, split. And second was that over those years, people already obtained their identities Ukrainians, no matter, again, no matter what language they speak, but also that we have our values, which are very European values. There are so many people who traveled. There are so many people who got into the European way of thinking, where the freedom and ability to make your decision about your own future is like much more important than anything else. And so when he attacked, hoping that people will be greeting him with flowers and his army with flowers, people were saying, whoa, the fact that we have the mutual past and we may be speaking Russian, it's our choice to be speaking Russian. It's not your right to tell us what to do because we are speaking Russian. And then what happened? It was also like a very, like a historic joke, because the regions that Putin's army destroyed the most were the ones where he had the most of the support generally, like not too much, but a lot. Like he destroyed the Russian-speaking regions. He destroyed the he destroyed the politicians that were supporting him and their factories and their territories. And like I'm Russian speaking generally. My parents are Russian speaking. I switched to Ukrainian and I'm trying not to speak Russian at all, because it's a matter of pride for me right now. And what Putin has done for Ukrainization and so many people switching to Ukrainian in Ukraine, creating media content and us, like separating from Russian at all. I don't think that we could have done it ourselves, like as politicians, as patriots, like in decades. So right now I can tell you, my parents, they're speaking terrible Ukrainian, debatedly probably the worst Ukrainian right now available, but they are like not giving it up. They are already at the age and they are like trying very hard, and they are doing it because they say we don't want those killers, murderers to be speaking the same language as we do. We had in Kiev, and this is like so after 2014 there was a huge debate, and my party was a part of this debate on what do we do with Soviet monuments, Soviet street names, Soviet books, because you see, we were part of the empire. So we have all this past where we have Russian poets, Russian all cultural, activists. And our names, our subways are named after them, because we thought, oh, it was international, so we are just like having it. And right now, since the full-scale invasion started, there has been not a debate. So today and yesterday in Kiev, there were like the two major monuments removed from some of the Russian generals, because people say, yeah, when we have our cultural past that we used to respect, and we thought it was so democratic of us to respect and say everybody has their own like point of view, etc. And it was used against us, saying, no, we are owning you. No, this is not going to happen. I can tell you, like a year and a half ago, when we made the suggestion, I was marked nationalistic and bad words. Yesterday and today, both monuments removed. So, and the renaming of the streets are happening like every other day. So I do hope that our children will, at some point, will have this broad understanding of what could be like the world's culture and not only the Russian culture of the past. It's very interesting, direction. I can talk about it ages, but let's move to the questions.
Well, actually, before we have a question, I've got a couple of comments from people. Julie, who asked some questions earlier, said, thank you, Kira, for being you, for speaking out, for traveling the world and taking your strong message to as many people as possible. And Sandy Walkington said, brilliant and forceful speech, thank you. He then asked a question which I think you've answered. How strong is the Liberal Party in Ukraine, and where does it fit into the overall political landscape? So, given what you said earlier, what would you like to add to that?
We are the smallest party in Ukrainian parliament. We do not know how the new parliament that I hope will be elected after we win the war would look like. But I absolutely sure that the liberal ideas will be presented.
Great, thank you. David Sears says, Kira, you quite reasonably have a long shopping list, at the top of which are major weapons supplied by governments. Is there any guidance for what local groups can do in the UK, if anything, and what should we prioritise? I think the assumption is that local groups won't have weapons.
This is where probably the time cell where we are talking about demining.
We'll come back to demining. I think he means he will put something up if he disagrees. We have a councillor in Hertfordshire called Paul Zukowski, who has collected a series of specialist items and taken them over in vans to Ukraine. I know one was medications, one so that first aid kits could be made up. It's that sort of thing. It's not just the traditional issues about food and clothing. It's about what are the specialist things that ordinary people can do.
Okay, so no demining. So a couple of things. First is right now our super top priority still is generators and everything related to generators. So for example, Taiwan government offered us $1 million for Kiev, and we spent every bit of it onto generators, because this is like what we will need after the winter, and we will need it for a long time, because as you can imagine, it would take a long time to rebuild 50% of energy infrastructure. So this is the first one, top priority. Small one, huge ones, everything is needed because we will have basically to decentralize our energy system. Second is the medical aid. So every soldier has to have a proper medical aid. And it's same as with food, with bullets. It's not that you have given one soldier one medical aid and you're done, because at some point he will have to have a new one, and you are happy because he is alive and asking you for a new one. So it's like super important. Then any kinds of medical supplies are needed, because people didn't stop getting sick and having like the general issues that they were having, especially at the deoccupied territories. Then all the clothes, food, and toys are very much welcome. I cannot even begin to tell you how much they're welcome, especially the places at the east, for people who are losing their homes every day. Then animals. As an animal activist, I need to tell you that we need always food, all the supplies to create shelters or repair shelters because they were severely damaged. Food, medical supplies for animals, everything that you can think of, we will take everything and put it to use. Probably one of the...
So I'm going to interrupt here, because I think one of the things that I've also seen with other people is groups getting together who have an expertise. So I'm on an all-party group that works with the fire services in the UK, and they've had 4 convoys of fire engines and firefighting equipment coming from the UK to Ukraine, because they know what they're doing. So I think my message to David is, if you've either got a professional background or you're involved with a group that might be in any one of those areas, focus on that, because you'll know how to resource it. And there's a bits online in the UK about how you can take things over. If there's a problem, get hold of me and I'll put you in touch with Paul Zukowski in Hatfield.
Thank you, Sal. I think it's a great idea, because again, like we are right now getting lots of ideas and supports, for example, from teachers who are trying to help to organize how to teach during the times of the war. It's like another topic that we did not get really up about, like how do children who has never been to school because of 2 years of COVID and now almost 2 years of war, how do they like manage, etc. And it's like another topic. So we sometimes it's like a huge help and support when people are coming with their expertise and just like trying to look at things that you have been struggling with a fresh eyes. That's also will be very helpful.
So the vet, sorry, David, let me just say this very quickly. The vet items I will take up with one of our top candidates who is a vet. Okay, David.
Can I just add something to that? I mean, one of the real, we've got so many Ukrainians now in the UK living amongst us in our communities. There's a real bond that I was at a party last weekend, a birthday party, fantastic Ukrainian food, and I'm looking forward to, we're celebrating a lot of sort of integration into our communities. And one of so that's a real way which we're just ordinary people can sort of bring people in and make them feel part of our community. You mentioned about the teachers, and I know somebody who is watching this is a teacher, and she gets up at like 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning to actually teach her class in the Ukraine. She then goes for I don't know how many hours. She then goes to work in the UK. So she goes and works in a cafe and does other things. And then in the evenings is back. And I know this is preparing the lessons for the next day for her class. This is what people, that she's here in the UK, but she's still managing to do that every single day, Kira. And I know that she's watching at the moment.
Thank you so much.
And
thank you.
And for David, one of the things we heard in the debate today from the bishop who spoke in the debate is that there's a lot of problems now that the 6 months support for families, with Ukrainian families trying to move to rented accommodation but not being able to afford the deposit. And it may be that in your community, David, you could get a group of people together who would be prepared to support the deposit as a loan for people so that they can actually get the home of their own for as long as they're here. That's just completely off the top of my head from something that was said in the debate today. Kira, we have 15 minutes and I think about 15 questions. So okay, I'm going to rattle through them. Yeah, I'll forgive me, colleagues. I'm just going to do the question. So Inga says, how can Ukraine and its allies counter propaganda of the kind that Putin and Russian allies do? So we'll try to be very short in this. We need to review the way of how we are working with media in Europe, and also in how do we invest in media in other countries. It's so easy for Russia to overflow everything with their propaganda, because in most like African, Asian countries, there is like nothing else than the Russian propagandist channels. And it will be a long path, but there should be somebody like an adult in the room who takes it on as a goal, as a project. As of right now, we were talking to our friends in European Commission and looking like who that could be, and different organizations in the United States. I do not see who is responsible just yet, but this already is a challenge, and it will become only worse moving forward. Daphne Vlastari says, given the political consensus in support of Ukraine, what do you think will be the barriers to the UK introducing the legislation on the use of funds? So I'm going to answer that one. And the answer is no government likes to be the first unless you're Boris Johnson. But we will keep fighting. There were a lot of Conservatives today in the debate saying this needed to happen, which will be very helpful. That's backbenchers from the government side who are already saying we must do this. So I think that's helpful. David says, Africa and the other countries outside Africa, it's a wonderful example of saying my enemy's enemy is my friend, but it's so misleading in today's complicated world. As in other discussions, few things are ever binary. And he goes on to say, if we want to help on a personal basis in the UK, what do we do and who do we contact? So David, I think I've given you the answer to that. And I will talk to Paul Zakowski, and I'll try and find a channel to talk to people and let them know. Ulysses Abate, who is a new member of our international committee, it's a question from Richard Smith. Many Ukrainian soldiers have been killed or wounded. Can Ukraine continue to fight for another 12 months if necessary? And then he says, Slava Ukraini. Thank you. Geroyam Slava. The simple answer is yes. Our army right now, by different amount, consists of 1 million of people, and our country still has enough men and women who will be fighting. There are challenges because we need to train people fast,
and to make sure that they replace the ones that are fighting at the front. And it is a challenge, and it will be an ongoing challenge. And what is so important of what Sal's relatives are doing is training people, not only the ones who are actually actively fighting, but the ones who can replace the ones who are fighting.
Susan asked, to what extent have Ukrainians who were Russian sympathizers at the beginning of the war changed, which I think is very slightly different to the question that David asked you, but I know that you covered that. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
So in most cases, yes, because you can be Russian sympathizer, but once there is a missile hitting your neighbor's home or your home, you stop being Russian sympathizer. I want to touch here on a painful but important note that the first 2 months of full-scale invasion, we had this huge hope that we can talk to Russians in Russia and explain to them that what's happening is so wrong, and hope that they will rebel. And it did not happen. And I think this is something that we will, till the end, we will be asking ourselves why. And I have probably it's another topic and longer explanations, but with all the, with all the information that is available in the world, with YouTube and everything else, it was not enough for people to change their minds to the point where they would be rebel against it.
Richard Schmidt says, it's been said there were many Russian sympathizers in Ukrainian security forces. Do you think they've been mostly expelled, or are there still known information leakage to Russia?
Yeah, so it was one of the issues that we had at the beginning of full-scale invasion, that we didn't expect that we had traitors and collaborationists at the matter. And there are still cases of the treasony, and they're going on and on and on. And I can tell you from what I see, internally, having the access to the information, that we have done a very good job in finding them and expelling them and prosecuting them for what they are doing. And it's much easier right now because it's a matter of life and death for so many people. So then when they see something, they usually say something, and they say it's just not okay, you're jeopardizing my own life. So, but I think at some point it will be such an interesting topic to share for our security services and internal services with the rest of their lives, because it's an experience that you're getting, on the go.
Thank you. David says, can he have a recording of this? I'm going to pass that. Rob doesn't need to answer, but if Rob could send the link to the recording to everyone who signed up for this, and we'll put it into some of the other international groups, party groups, then other people can catch up with this seminar, webinar in their own time. Julie asked a very practical question. Would solar lamps, solar chargers, and wind-up rechargeable radios with USB ports also be useful to add to the generator list? I think yes. I see a nod. I'm going to gallop on with that. Helen says that her local council are offering a deposit scheme for Ukrainian refugees who need to find their own space. That's fantastic. Not many are. And David is the last comment here saying, thanks, Sal, this is a battle we have to fight and win. So please let me know how we can help. I will take that one away. So we've got just over 5 minutes, Kira, to talk about demining. Do you remember when you and I had a catch up in May when I said, what can we do to help? And you said,
yes, I said, well, I said that there was not a single point of help that we refused since the very beginning. And if you have bricks, send us the bricks, we will use them to throw at Russians. But so the demining is one of the critical things, because we basically are right now back to, I don't know, not even the Second World War, but all the terrifying stories when people in the areas that were under the occupation, or just the areas of the battlefield, have this huge threat of the landmines. The issue is, first, there is not a huge amount of time in the year when you can have the proper demining, because of the Ukrainian is a winterish state. Second is the huge amount, there were no maps of demining. Honestly, not from our side, not from Russian side of the mining, because everybody were just trying to, you know, save their lives and fight, etc. And these are agricultural lands, and it's like also terrifying because I have so many friends who are farmers and who are telling me about how they how somebody went with the demining, you know, like the top one, and then their tractor got just exploded with everybody who was in there, and it was just farmers who went out to prepare the land. I think we are looking at a decade of demining activities and efforts, and it's super terrifying, like when you're looking forward to it. So these are the efforts that we need to have everybody in place with all the resources and capacities, because the war is not over, but also what we already have as a leftover of the battlefields is a terrifying, and the toll is going all up and up every day.
So Kira said to me, could I talk to our government about providing some support for demining? And I never go and talk to the government unless I am reasonably well informed. So I had contact in the past with MAG, the mining advisory group. And obviously I know about the, my brain's completely gone, the other major group, the Halo Trust. And I went to talk to MAG, and they gave me a briefing, and they said, it's extraordinary that you've rung us today. This was mid-May, and Russians had just started removing themselves from bits of Donbass and Luhansk, hadn't they, at that point? And they said, we've got a problem. The government, UK government, is talking about supporting us, but they're proposing to take it from the demining funds for the rest of the world. And obviously they didn't want that. So I went in armed to speak to a minister from the Commons, and armed is probably the right word, isn't it? Oops. And the minister from the Lords to say, look, Ukraine really needs help. They need specific funding for the mines they found now, for the mines they have had between 2014 and 2022, because there's a lot there, and a plan for the future. And by the way, the Mines Advisory Group and the Halo Trust are ready to go, including training people in Ukraine. So they did agree that money for at least, I think they fund this in 3-year periods. There's about 18 months to go, and they've just agreed the next period. And there is extra money in there. The next bit of the story is about how Ukraine responds when someone says help. And MAG went and started talking, and I've got the list somewhere, to the key group they needed to. They went through 5 other Ukrainian ministries and got approval and registration with each of those in less than a month, and we're out there in less than a month, and have been not just demining, but training Ukrainians to demine as well. It is happening. And that is all because you said, Kira, we need demining. And, you know, and there were lots of people who made it happen. We just happened to talk to each other. It is extraordinary, the will that is out there with everything and everyone. But Kira, without you saying that, we wouldn't have done it. We just would not have done it because we didn't know.
Sal, thank you so much. I didn't know it went so far. Thank you so much. And you see, it's not about because of me telling you, it's because you're going forward. And yeah, like I'm speechless. Thank you so much. I know it's like a huge long path ahead of us in this matter, but it's so important that it started early. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think we can only end one way, which is not just say thank you, but also to say Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava. And thank you everyone for arranging it and supporting us. We will fight and we will win. I can promise you that.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching as well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.